This is Amy Brand from Jacobs. I'm the facilitator. Welcome to the Barnes Air National Guard Base Restoration Board. We're on meeting number 8. So welcome to everybody. I guess we'll, I think just for the sake of, let's go ahead on the slide, sorry. Okay. You are recording? Mm-hmm. Okay, this meeting is being recorded, just so everybody knows, and we do put those out on YouTube. Our agenda tonight is reviewing the agenda and just quick on hybrid meeting logistics. Welcome and introductions. We'll cover some RAB business and then environmental restoration program status update. And then questions from the public will be held at the end. Questions from RAB members, I think you all know, we hold at the end of each presentation. And then there'll be closing remarks from our co-chairs, and we'll adjourn hopefully at 7:30. Next slide. So in terms of hybrid meeting logistics, go ahead. So for those of you who are online, we do keep video off. Don't worry about it, except for presenters. None of our presenters online. You can open the participants list to see who else is online. RAB members, when you have questions, go ahead and raise your hand to be called on, and then unmute yourself when called on. And I think we have Kristen and Chris and Marianne online in terms of RAB members. Are there any other RAB members who are online? Type into the chat so Johanna knows that. And then for public participants, the way we handle questions from the public that are online, actually what you see on your screen is wrong because WebEx has just done an update that is different. So forget about the whole Q&A panel because I don't think you'll find it, but we have enabled the chat feature. Please don't use it for chatting during the meeting, the same as we ask people here not to be chatting during the meeting. Just use it for questions so we can track those. And we will respond to those questions at the end of the meeting. Next slide. If you are on your phone, hopefully you were able to download a copy of the presentation. It is on the 104th Spider Wing website. And just go ahead and use your phone mute button and dial *3 to raise your hand if you're on the phone. Go ahead, Johanna.
Sorry I'm late, everybody.
That's okay. Excellent.
Finally, we see you.
Voice in home box.
So Colonel Hoskins just arrived. So the meeting guidelines, and I just discussed this a little bit, RAB members are able to ask questions at the end of each presentation, each topic. Raise your hand to be called on to speak. You know, I ask people to observe a 2-minute limit. I'm not tracking that. I just, want to make sure that everybody has a chance to be heard and to ask their questions. When you ask questions, please do go ahead and say who you are. That will make it a lot easier when we do the meeting summary, and it helps people in the room know who's speaking online. It helps people online know who's, people in the room to know. And again, public participants, forget the all co-hosts, go ahead and type your questions into chat and we will address those at the end of the meeting. Next slide, Johanna. Okay, so you're just in time.
Just in time.
So welcome from our co-chairs, Colonel Hoskins and Kathleen.
Great to finally see everybody. I'm sorry my travel schedule has made it for the last couple of meetings I couldn't be here, but thank goodness, COVID's over and now we can all look each other in the eye and get to problem back. Yes. But really, I know that we are talking, and I don't see Kristen. Is Kristen online?
She's online.
Okay, she's on. I know we're going to talk more about the next round of the TAP grant, which is fantastic. The current round of the TAP grant, we have some things that we have to get through, obviously, so I'm looking forward to having those discussions. Again, ANGB is on the phone.
Chris Brown is right here in the room.
Chris, I don't think I've ever
He's there.
Here?
Yes, sir.
All right. I remember the beer. Anyway, so Chris is here. Obviously, we're going to dive a little bit more into what the way forward is, where we stand on the timeline. I do not have any big concerns on the timeline right now. I'm sure there's concerns inside the community, but that's why we're here, to kind of make sure that everybody is aware of where things stand. But quite honestly, what I see, and as I talk to other commanders that are dealing with this, the same exact problem, right? This is a national problem, not a Westfield problem. We are still well ahead of where other organizations are, which again, allow me to reiterate that as long as we are ahead, we are going to be the first ones to be able to take advantage of any funds or help that exist out there. So my goal and what I will continue to do is to push the process forward. And I know, Chris, you're on board with that too, to kind of stay ahead and be on the leading edge. Other than that, it's good to see you. Well,
Okay, Kathleen?
I don't have much to say. I'm just glad everybody's here, and it looks like we have some participants over here, so that's awesome. I just want to move us forward with this.
Great.
I do have some things that I want to bring forward that Kristen has.
Right, I was going to address that. Her email?
Yes,
Right.
and she has authorized, she put together some voting that we're going to have to do today to designate her as the person who's in charge of the grant.
Okay, Okay.
So we're going to do that tonight, and see, point of contact, okay. So I've got two documents that
okay,
we're going to sign, and the RAB people will vote on it.
okay, great. So next slide. So this is our welcome and introductions. I know Colonel Hoskun's here in person. Jen Baker is on the phone, I believe. Chris Brown is here in person. I'm Amy Brand. And in terms of RAB members that I know are here, we have Kathy, Chris is on the phone, Kristen's on the phone. Jane's here in person, Dawn is here in person. Marianne is on the phone. Mary's here in person, and I have not seen Representatives or Senator. Are they online or?
Mark Messner for Senator Bellis.
Okay, so he has a representative here?
Who's on it first?
Mark
Oh,
Messner.
Mark, okay.
Okay. Nabil Hanoush did submit his resignation, so that's why it's in red crossed out. So I wanted to, before I just deleted it, I wanted to make sure that I brought that to everybody's attention. Caprice Shaw is on vacation, and there was another Mass DEP person who was going to try to make it, but is not able to, I believe.
Amy, if we want to fill that position that Nabil has resigned from?
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
Yep. Absolutely. Yep. Okay, and from the Army Corps of Engineers, we have here, you can go ahead and introduce yourselves. A lot of people on this slide are here actually in the room.
I'm Amanda Martin. I'm the project manager for the Army Corps of Engineers. And then two other our members are.
Go ahead, you can speak up. You should be able to be heard online.
I'm Jenna Pell. I'm the project chemist from the Army Corps. And I'm Grace Greenberg. I'm the risk assessor.
Okay. James?
And I'm James Griffin. I'm with SRS, the alternate project manager for the contractor team.
Okay, and I think Andrew is online.
Andrew is on.
Is Mike online?
I think Mike is not available today, but.
There are probably a few other folks from both of your organizations that
Yeah.
are also online, I would guess.
Yeah, Dan.
Um,
Dan Pauline as well.
Okay, excellent. Okay, next slide, please. So we'll go through some RAB business to start. One of the things I wanted to address is after I sent out the draft final presentation, which is the exact presentation you see here, we didn't change anything. Kristen sent back some questions. I think she copied everybody, so everybody's seen those. What we're gonna do is go ahead and address, so the team has looked at those, talked about it, so we're gonna address as many as we can during the presentation. And ones that we don't address during the presentation, we'll address at the end of the meeting, except for the membership question, which we'll go ahead and cover during RAB business. Okay. Next slide. So the meeting summaries, so this is a little transactional stuff. So the email for the meeting summary was sent out July 5th. As per this team's agreement, the draft is posted on the website so the public can see the draft. Are there any comments on the draft? Meeting summary. Thank you. I am seeing no comments. Any comments from RAB members online? Any hands raised?
No comments in the chat.
Okay, Then what we will do is go ahead and just change the name on that from draft to final. Actually, Jay, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good evening. My name is Jay Hewitt. I'm the 104th Fiber Health Affairs Manager. Anything that goes on to our website or any kind of social media, I'm the person that handles that. So, yeah, I posted the draft onto the website and I can go ahead and update that final and, yeah.
Great. Okay, thanks so much. Next slide. Okay, so the upcoming meetings are the fourth Thursday of the month, every 3 months, with slight adjustments made when needed. So these are the dates for the upcoming meetings: October 24th, January 30th, and April 24th. I think it's possible that January 30th, I think it's still the fourth Thursday. I don't know. Anyway, we agreed on those meetings last time. And the last time we were here, we talked a little bit about this location and accessibility in terms of the stairs and elevator. And so I did look into that. I called the library. There is an elevator here. The issue is has some problems sometimes with weight limits. And so it breaks more often than they would like it to break. And they are in the process. There will be a new one installed, but it involves some structural work to install the new elevator. So that's the situation with the elevator. When we discussed this last time, we decided that we felt okay about continuing to meet here, but obviously we don't want to exclude anybody that might want to come because they can't get into the room easily. Do we still feel comfortable with meeting in this room, given that the elevator is a little bit off and on until they get it replaced? The other option would be that I know of to go back out to the community college. And I think last time we talked about a conference room at the airport as a possibility.
It's not a community college.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. I'm so sorry. I apologize. I was just remembering. I'm my apologies. Westfield State University.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That's my fault. I was just remembering incorrectly. Westfield State University is where we met one time. And concerns with that were the distance and traffic getting out there this time of day.
And
So
especially with those other meetings, because the college will be in.
we'll be in session.
So that makes a difference.
Okay. So is the team okay with continuing to meet here?
I know.
Okay. All right. Great. Next slide. Okay, before we talk about this, let me just go back a second. I do want to go ahead and talk about what Kristen had put into her email and Kathy just asked about, which is membership. The question that was put into the email is there a minimum or a maximum number of community RAB members that have to be kept? And is it in the operating procedures? And should we invite interested parties to attend and apply? The operating procedures, I went back and looked, and Kathy probably did too. So correct me if I misstate anything, but it said there was a maximum of 12 community members. This group was formed with 8. There is a maximum of 12 community members. There is no minimum. So, I mean, if there's only one person coming, I suppose there'll be a conversation about whether that makes sense. But we didn't write in, I'm not really worried about this RAB from a minimum number that way. There are procedures for accepting applications and approving new members. We did agree at an earlier meeting to do rolling applications. So the application itself, the operating procedures, a flyer about like what is a RAB, those are all on the website. So we can drive people to the website to find that information. The application that's there is a fillable PDF.
And has it been updated? Because when they applied, they had the wrong name of it, to send you to.
I think it has my name on it or Jen Baker. So I'll double check.
Can you just check with
Yep,
her?
I will look.
Okay,
Name to send it to. I think it has been updated,
okay.
but I will double check that. Okay. And then the other thing in terms of, so by law, under the federal RAB rule, is the RAB is supposed to be made up of people who represent a cross-section of the community, and kind of different types of, interests in the community, and I think we tried to do that when we established the RAB. What happens over the time with all RABs is that as some people drop off, and then the people that remain invite other people who they think might be interested, the diversity of the RAB may change a little bit over time. So I want to encourage you, as you think of potential people that you might want to reach out to join the RAB. We lost, I think we got Nabil by reaching out through the Chamber of Commerce, or maybe it was Eric Willett. And so we don't have a business representative per se. Now, maybe one of you is a business owner, I don't know. But so that's just an example. And so that's something to consider as we reach out to ask new applicants to join. I think it's on the application. You can't work for a company that can make money off of decisions that are made on the cleanup, you can't be personally involved in a lawsuit against the government. There's some things like that, but the biggest thing is we're looking for people who want to participate in a productive, honest, open, transparent discussion and share information with your friends and neighbors and the people you see at the gym or the grocery store or work or wherever, and share information from here with the community and bring community issues and concerns back to the table here. So that's, and you all know that that's the role of being a community liaison on the RAB. So,
Jen said that she believes the applications are sent to her.
okay,
And then she would gather them and send them to the group, prior to the next meeting.
they should go to the two co-chairs.
Okay.
So, put a copy to me probably. But, and then Kathleen is gonna share them with the RAB, but yeah, we wanna make sure the co-chairs get them.
And it usually comes from us if we want to.
Right, that's right. So in terms of one of the question was, you're welcome to share the link to the application materials. If you want to make up a social media thing to share, that's fine. I think we have a flyer that I can send out to you as a PDF, that you're happy to share out through email or what have you, so. Does that answer people's questions about membership on the RAB? Okay, so you're welcome to replace Nabil and add up to a maximum of 12.
Because we didn't, we did replace Rachel,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
we have good people.
Okay. All right, moving on then to the TAP, we'll go back to the TAP grant. There are people here who know a lot more about this than I think, Pearl Sinclair, you're gonna start there and we'll probably hear from Kristen too, I would guess.
Good afternoon, Lieutenant Colonel Sinclair. Basically on the TAP grant, we've been moving forward. Unfortunately, the university backed out and isn't going to participate in this one. So we still have the funding. We're reworking the acquisition and we'll definitely have an award before the end of September. But we're looking at other options of who's able to help provide us education on the PFAS and the health implications. Ms. Mello also already provided another resource that we're going to look at, as well as we have a couple others that we're looking into in order to provide this service to you. So unfortunately, we were hoping to have it awarded by now.
You know why we asked for that? You know?
There was a back and forth on conflict of interest. And as it was presented, going, hey, the conflict of interest needs to be removed, and on that removal of the conflict of interest, they said they couldn't find a solution that they could present. They said, we're not interested in bidding anymore. Is that a fair summary?
Fair summary.
Any other questions or comments about that?
Do you have a timeline for what? How we're gonna
I have until the end of September to get it awarded. So we still have all the funding. It's guaranteed. I've been working with, Chris Brown. So we'll have the funding. We just gotta move everything through before September and we'll have it.
Okay.
And part of the negotiations will be, how long it will take whoever to review all the information and present to you. So as soon as I have a contract awarded, I'll be able to provide you a better update on when they will be ready to present to you.
Okay. Does it look like it's going to fall within the time frame?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
money, it'll be fiscal, so fiscal year ends in September 31st. So we're going to spend that money.
Before,
Try not
I
to
want
spend the
it.
money.
Supply into the air.
Yeah, as long as the bids come in and we can find resolution with the bidders, then absolutely, we're on a good track right now to execute by the end of the fiscal year.
Okay.
Of course, there are things that could go wrong between now and then. It's a bureaucratic process, but we are leaning hard into this, making sure that we get bids coming back.
And does this have to do with, doing the survey of the land and digging down and?
This has
It
nothing to do with this.
Okay.
All it is reviewing current information
Okay.
that is out there and then providing education on what we have for, contamination levels with PFAS in the water and what are the effects on us in the community.
Okay.
I would just like to clarify I know in the message, she was asking if that was the FY '23, but you were going for fiscal year '24 money, so it's that one, that TAP grant is considered the FY '24 TAP grant here, and the next one that you are gonna ask to vote on would be considered the FY '25.
Okay.
So we're just off by 1 year. Just
Okay.
Going with
Because with the timeline there.
the government's calendar year from October to September, not
Right.
January.
Fiscal year.
Fiscal year. So then Kathy, what you wanted to vote on was for the next TAP grant, not this one that's in process. For the next TAP grant, you want to do a vote of the RAB community members to agree to have Kristen
Yep.
move forward on that application.
Yep, can I do it now or?
Sure.
I would like to make a motion to have Kristen Mello be our lead person to pursue the next TAP grant.
Community RAB members, go ahead and raise your hand if you agree. It's unanimous here in the room and
Mary Ann has her hand raised. She had a question before.
I think we have a majority. I think we're safe to say. Okay, Marianne, you go ahead.
Yes, I raised my hand for this. I had it raised already, so it was up there.
Okay, go ahead.
It is for the vote too, but no, somebody who was just speaking mentioned a university backed out. For clarification, when you have these, people might listen later on. I don't know, since there was a conflict of interest, whether you're going to name the university or that's because of conflict of interest or whatever. That's why you didn't even mention.
No, it was not intentional. UMass put in the original bid. UMass Lowell.
UMass Lowell.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, because there was two that have worked with us, UMass in Amherst and UMass. So this one was the UMass Lowell. All right, that's all I wanted. Specify more information, just because everybody looks back at this afterwards, and it's just too generalized when you say that. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm getting text from Kristen. Can you clarify, what did we just actually vote on?
We voted to make Kristen the lead on the FY '25 TAP application.
All right, well, Kristen's also needs us, is asking that we vote on the actual project.
Has there been a project proposal?
Yes.
Could you describe that?
Kristen?
Hi there. Sure. Yeah, the actual vote that we need to have in order to follow the CFR thing, is a vote on the project. And the project, is to have Dr. Bout step back in and, answer the remainder of the RAB questions about, co-contaminant plumes and information that's in the other, parts of the base's DEP waste site cleanup files. Right, because sometimes the things we do about other contaminants will affect the things we try to do about PFAS. And we forgot to ask about that in the first TAP grant. And so we have to add that to this. But this is also the time to ask for his help going over the UFP QAP and, you know, the work plan and what that means with the new proposed federal drinking water regulations and et cetera, et cetera. So that's what it's about. And Kathleen should have a blue folder with that information. And everything that the Colonel needs is in that folder. And there are 2 attachments that need to be addressed. One was voting to have me make everything in the folder. Thank you for that because it's already made. And the second would be, if we vote that that's the project you want to do, then you write down the vote on that other page, sign it, and then it's all set for the Colonel.
Okay.
Oh, and
Chris, I have one question. This is Amy. I haven't seen the proposal, just making sure that I understand it. When you talked about co-contaminant plumes and other DEP sites and stuff, are these under CERCLA or are these current environmental sites that might fall under current environmental regulations rather than environmental cleanup under CERCLA?
Well, see, this is Massachusetts Chapter 21E. So they follow CERCLA, but it's not right. And it's a city-owned land, and it's federally leased for $1 for 100 years or something, right? So that is not my legal scope of knowledge.
Okay. Nor is it mine. I just wanted to, and it'll go to people who know a lot more about these things than I do. I just am hoping that federal TAP funds are eligible for looking into that.
Well, these are documents that are in the exact same folder that the other ones came from that are base cleanup files. So there shouldn't be any reason we can't review base cleanup files.
Okay. Well, Chris is nodding his head and has the
right, like from like previous oil things underneath the hangar and stuff where they put down the perchlorate, right? Like, yeah.
Okay, he's looking agreeable, and like I said, I don't know these things. I just wanted to throw it out there to make sure, you know, if there was a concern that we start to address it. So
yeah, no, it's just we gave them a specific list of documents to read last time, and it didn't include those, but it's all from the same database and it's all the same people.
Okay.
And
all right. So what I'm hearing then is that we need a vote to move forward on this project topic.
Correct.
Sorry.
Can we have Kristen word like the motion and then we can all vote?
Sure. Kristen, could you word it like a motion?
Oh,
we don't really do Robert's rules of order, but you know, if you guys want it that way, that's fine.
Move to have someone in the room check those documents to make sure they say FY25 instead of 24. I don't know if it's written there or not. Number one. And then move to have our FY 2025 PAP project be interpretation of technical documents by Dr. David Bout, and education for RAB members about what's in the UFP QAP and what it will do and what it means for us.
Second.
Timeline for the QAP, Chris, are we still tracking this fiscal year for the QAP?
The QAP is still in progress. It'll be ready for RAB review approximately in the October timeframe. So it would be under FY25.
Okay. And Chris has the application. Did you see what it say FY25 on there?
Not seeing fiscal year reference, but
he's not seeing any fiscal year reference. So
I'm not worried about the fiscal year reference on the, I mean, when I get the application and I go for the project and go ask for the money, I'll get it in FY25.
Okay. All right. So do people agree that they would like to move forward with this project? Raise your hand if you agree. I see all the community members are voting yes, and yes, everybody online has their hand raised. Okay, so that is unanimous that community RAB members would like to move forward with this application. Great. Thanks for all your hard work on that, Kristen.
Kristen.
Thank you. Oh, and Amy, I believe that UMass Amherst, in a matter of weeks is going to have plenty of grad students, and the professors in public health have always been very good to us. So I don't think you'll have any problem going to them. And
Okay.
thank you for all your patience and understanding. I know that was a challenge.
Well, it hasn't been me, but the folks who have been involved are in the room listening as well. So thanks. Okay.
No smiling, Kristen. Smiling, so that's a good sign.
All righty. Okay. So that's it on the TAP grant. I think moving on then. I think is there any other RAB member discussion on any of this RAB business? We kind of did it as we went, but okay, we'll move on to the presentations then. Okay, Chris will lead us off on the Environmental Restoration Program status update. Chris?
Right. For the record, on the line is Chris Brown here from the National Guard Bureau, also known as the Air National Guard Readiness Center, for those that are in the Guard. I'm here to give you a quick update on the restoration program, and I haven't briefed it in a couple of meetings because we've been really focused on the PFAS stuff, and that's okay, but I just wanted to remind folks about the Site 2 current status. We're getting really close to the draft permanent solutions statement is at draft final stage, and now that document can accompany the lease amendment that needs to go through, because they both kind of have to get put together at the same time. Whatever is going to be presented as the solution, basically it's a use limitation to the old POL underground storage tanks that we had with some piping, all that stuff's been removed. 25 feet of soil has been dug up, over tons of years, at least 8 different actions have taken place, and now we're getting to the finish line. But all that has to be incorporated in real estate documents, and that can take time. So I just wanted to remind folks, we're still working one legacy site here that is not PFAS related. I'm not sure, I can't give you any timelines on that because real estate documents do take a long time to go through the process. Because it goes with all the lawyers, and I don't know their timelines.
They make it slow.
They're very thorough. And then, of course, we're here to present some more information on the PFAS remedial investigation. Just a reminder, we're at the very beginning step of the CERCLA process for the RI. We haven't done any sampling yet, so the next thing to come out is the UFP QAP, which you just heard will be, late fall going into October. And so that being that won't come out until October, that field sampling activities will move to the right a little bit because we have to share the QAP with the regulators. So your comments, the regulators, we're all going to combine those and review the document. And then once that's approved, we can go do field activities. So that is dependent upon when we get the QAP signed. And then the last RAB, there was the reason they chose the word courtesy on the pond or the dam project was because this starts to go beyond the scope of restoration activities from barns. So the dam is the engineer that is working that project. I've given him the information. I've told him where the admin record is. I've given him our sampling results. I told him when we're going to do field work, possibly. So we're in coordination more from if we are going to step over each other's toes when we're in the field, but that starts to go beyond what my scope of responsibilities can do, because that is nothing that the DOD is working on. So I and there's no formal process. There are other avenues, like when the project was announced, and then if it was the city or the state that put the project out for public comment periods, that's a whole nother process that's outside of the world that I get to work in. So that's why I chose the word courtesy notification, but I am working with them to try and make sure that everybody is aware of what's going on and where we've sampled and where we may go sample again.
That's good that you did that.
It's just, I don't have a legal connection.
So Chris, in your discussion about that was addressing one of the questions that Kristen had submitted about, clarifying courtesy notification, whether could be more coordination. Kristen, do you feel like he answered your question, or do you need me to read it out loud?
If I could ask a clarifying, would it be beneficial for the lack of a mechanism for coordination to be addressed at a higher level?
I'm not sure that that would, because there are already other ways for information, but I mean, you know, it never hurts to ask folks questions.
Okay.
I'm not sure that there will be any different answer. I did do some searching and I just could not find where our two paths cross, and neither could the engineer that I was speaking with. But we agreed to stay in contact.
Sure, but if I can squeak in the right office, I will for you.
Okay, Kathy?
How often will you be in contact with that person?
Well, right now, it's just in the design phase.
Okay,
So we're not stepping on top of each other.
but after it's,
If we're gonna be getting in the field, then we'll need to talk more regularly, like, hey, we're going to, if he's gonna have people out doing work and we're gonna have people out there go take samples, you know, we could cross each other's paths. So we'll wanna make sure we're in contact for that.
okay. And do you do it by text or do you do it by?
We got each other's phone.
Oh, okay.
Excellent.
And this was just, you know, kind of a reminder of our calendar so that I can make sure that we understand when the fiscal years are there for the TAP grant applications. And when it's kind of the visual of the words we already said. I don't think there's any more to add to this slide.
Right. So just to clarify, the Qs there those are the calendars that we as civilians think of.
Oh, yes. the top-
So
top-
Q4 ends in December 31st, right?
Yes. And the
December
fiscal year is the ones in green.
Okay.
Guess I could put some months in there. I try not to make it too busy.
Why can't we all be on the same page?
Wish.
You know, I think we should do Congress to make sure.
Okay, that's new action item from Kathy.
It does get confusing though,
Yeah.
doesn't it, for you and for everybody?
Yes, because we treat October 1st like a brand new year, but I still gotta wait till January to do it all. Okay, and here's where we're gonna get into some more information to go about, and then you'll see some words. I know that there are some words that we don't like here, but we're following the CERCLA process and we have to make sure we use the CERCLA terminology. So if you see stuff that's repeated here, it's because we're still in the very beginning of the remedial investigation, and until we've gotten to the RI report, we will have to use words like potential. I know it's not a good word. I'm not, trying to downplay what has happened in this area, but I am still from the perspective of the investigation. We haven't finished it, so it's still potential as you're evaluating. And I will turn it over to the team to get into the technical details.
Very good, very good. So again, I'm James Griffin with SRS, alternate project manager for the contract team. So just to kind of expand on that a little bit, as you've heard, we're in the process of preparing the CLAP. And so I'm just going to give you a little bit more information this evening about what we've included in that and what the purpose of that is.
Before we get started, can everybody hear him online okay? Just type in chat if you cannot hear him. And then Johanna will nudge him since
Nudge
she's
me.
sitting next to him.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Sounds good. So the primary objective of the PFAS RI is to define the extent of what PFAS may have been released from DOD, okay? And to define those potential exposure pathways, and to assess and determine if eventually remedial action is going to be necessary. And as Chris touched on just a minute ago, the use of the word potential really is just in the context of us in this investigation, looking at it from the perspective of, are those exposures related to DOD or not? So that's really what one of the goals of our investigation here is to try to define. And so to do that, we develop data quality objectives. And these are established, obviously in the UFP lab, as we've talked about. And it's basically a systematic process, and it's to collect data to meet the overall project objectives, okay? And those DQOs, which I'll talk about here more in detail in just a moment, those are really what define what the sampling approach will be. And so we've got some more maps prepared for you guys to look at where we plan to investigate. So we'll get to that here momentarily. And so one note down here at the bottom is just to keep in mind that this is just the first phase of the RI. So there likely will be another phase at some point. So everything that we talk about that is included now is just the beginning stages of it. So there will be likely more to come after we've completed this part. So, all right. So first of all, if you go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of soil sampling, so the DQO that we've established there is to answer the following questions. Really, the first one is, what is the spatial or lateral and vertical extent, so how deep into the ground is the PFAS related to barns in the soil and in those AOCs. And again, I'll show you the map here very soon. And are PFAS in the soil at the site contributing to groundwater contamination? So that's another thing we're looking at is groundwater as well. And the answers to those first two questions will inform the third main question here. And that is, again, how much of that PFAS is related to barns and DOD activity. So if you go to the next slide, please. So you saw a version of this map at one of the previous RABs. So we've largely kept it the same, but we've kind of added a few things on here for you guys to have a look at. But the two orange outlines obviously are the limits of barns. And then in the magenta or the pink color there are our AO's areas of concerns that we're going to be investigating. And so what we did add, and I do apologize, it's a little bit hard to see, but there are a number of black and red dots that you can see there. And what those represent are sample locations for soil that were collected during the previous investigation. So during the site investigation and the expanded site investigation some years back. And so represented in red or represented in black are those locations where soil samples were collected, but there were no soil exceedances found. And so they were essentially below the levels that we're concerned with. But you can see there's a number of those in red, especially down in the lower left-hand corner area of concern one. There were several locations sampled where there were exceedances of the criteria that we're concerned about. And so for our investigation moving forward, we're going to be looking at this more in depth, obviously. And so the yellow shaded areas, those big swaths of area, those are really inclusive of where we intend to collect more soil sampling. So try to define what PFAS may be in the soils around those previously sampled areas. So we just want to further define how far out and how deep those go. And so we have several different not approaches, but we have options to include expanding that out if we need to. But generally speaking, the areas within those swaths are where we're going to focus this first round or this phase of the RI. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's move on and talk about groundwater now. So again, we've established the DQOs, data quality objectives for groundwater. And really it's to answer, again, another set of questions that we're concerned with. So very similar to soil, we want to know how far spatially, how far out, east, west, north, and south, that DOD related PFAS may be found. And then the second question is that groundwater, is the groundwater contributing to surface water concentrations in PFAS? So going to talk about a little bit of hydrogeology here, and you guys probably are very aware of this already, but the surface water, the groundwater itself can or does discharge into surface water bodies. And so that's part of what we're going to be looking at, is to understand what that connection is. Because as you know, Pond Brook, Arm Brook, Westfield River, it's all around the base. And so it's very important for us to understand what those conditions are in groundwater and if they're impacting potentially surface water bodies as well. And so, let's see here. So if we answer those first three questions, that gives us the fourth question here that'll inform the last one here again. What portion of that could be attributed to barns or DOD? Okay, if you go to the next slide, please. All right, here's another little visual for everybody here. Again, this is a version of a figure you may have seen when you were at one of the previous meetings, but so this is showing our intended sample area for groundwater. So this is a much larger area. So this extends all the way north of the airfield and all the way south. The very lower limit of that yellow highlighted area is the Westfield River. So it really encompasses quite a large area. And so what you see on there, you see a bunch of red dots. And so what those represent are monitoring wells that were installed during previous investigations. And those were sampled. And so the red indicates that those were exceedances of groundwater RSLs that we're looking at for this study as well. So from all the red, bless you. Now there were a couple, you can't really see them too well, but they were blue. So that just means it did not exceed the criteria that we're interested in. But what you can see from this large swath is we started on the inside with the red dots where those wells are currently located. Well, we know we need to move out further, obviously. So we really captured quite a large area. And so those specific locations where we want to put monitoring wells haven't been completely determined yet. We're still in the process of figuring that out. We're going through a review process right now, as Amanda mentioned. But somewhere within that highlighted area, we will be doing work. We'll be installing monitoring wells to investigate groundwater. Okay, next slide, please.
I saw Kristen's, this is Amanda Martin with the Corps. I saw Kristen's question pop up and ask if we were sampling all the way to the river. And the answer is generally yes. Kristen will collect enough data within that area to kind of understand the interaction with the river.
Can you go back one slide real quick? Let's go back to that one.
I mean, she had another question also. I was holding them to the end, but
Yeah, there is a lot in this section, so maybe we'll
Okay.
stop and take questions on what you've covered so far, and then we'll move on, because there's a lot in this
Okay.
section. So,
let me go back then to when she submitted the first question, which was on
on soil,
slide 20.
okay.
I can read it, or Kristen.
Kristen, you can unmute
Yeah.
and go ahead and ask.
Yeah, I just wanted to know when these samples were taken. You were talking about soil at the time, but really all media it would apply to. When the samples were taken, what were you said levels they were concerned with? What levels were they at the time? Were they the levels in the Massachusetts contingency plan? Were there levels in the MCP at the time they were taken? And what are the levels now? Right? Are we working at federal levels? Are we working at state levels? Because there is still that requirement in the lease.
Right. So the levels that I refer to, I'm sorry for not being clear on that. Those levels are the ones that are included in our investigation. It's the OSD memo from 2023. It's the levels that are established in that memo. Yeah, it was November 2023, I think is what it was. Yeah,
I think so.
yeah,
So those are federal screen levels?
Those federal screen levels.
correct.
Does that answer your question, Kristen?
Well, I don't have the memo on me. Do we know offhand what those numbers are? Can someone send them to me?
They're the EPA RSLs, yeah. So
Okay.
that's what DOD is authorized to use for CERCLA investigations currently.
Right, but the lease requires cleanup to state levels?
So in the remedial investigation phase of work, we are authorized to use the DOD values in the OSD memo, and then we consider ARARs, applicable, relevant, and appropriate requirements in the feasibility study phase of the CERCLA process, which is where we evaluate the remedial options. So at this stage in the process during the RI, we're just screening against the OSD values, which are the EPA RSLs, but ARARs like the MCP values will be considered in subsequent stages of the CERCLA process.
Okay, and how did the new federal MCLs affect that? Right, that's a dramatic drop. That if you're only screening to a much higher level, are you guys gonna have to do all of this over again?
Well, the sampling will have the data, but what you're getting at is the MCLs have been announced, yes. The rule has gone through and it's out there, but the DOD does not have its guidance been pushed out. So OSD has been in talks with the departments, with all the departments.
Let's
and-
back up and do this again with less acronyms. I'm realizing I know what MCLs and OSD are, but not everybody does. Sorry about that, Chris.
So yes, the maximum contaminant levels have been published. But the Office of the Secretary of Defense has not pushed out the guidance through the Department of Defense for all the departments on how they're going to follow those. It has been undergoing talks with all the department heads. And that guidance is very close to being finalized and should be getting pushed out to us here soon. So in absence of that, I don't have a better answer until I see what is written in this memo that has been in talks. It's
But for right now, for data collection, you'll be collecting data that can be compared against whichever levels at the time that you get to comparing the levels.
the sampling method will go down to the level that we need to be able to use. It's just what will be the level that is told to us in writing that that's where you make your decisions.
Who's gonna tell you that?
It comes, yeah.
And the purpose of the sampling is to properly model the plume, so that remediation can then be made against the plume, right? So the levels as it pertains to the sampling are really about modeling this accurate at this point.
And being able to calculate risks to human health and the effectment during the risk assessment.
Right, but the difference between when this data was taken and the numbers that this data is based on and the threshold for what damages human health are the difference is dramatic, right? Which we all agree. So I just, as long as you understand the work ahead of you, then you understand it too. Okay,
What I'm hearing is that the bottom line is for sampling, we're collecting the data.
Yep.
And that, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm just interpreting what I'm hearing. We're collecting the data, see what's out there. And when it comes time to doing the risk assessment and making decisions on cleanup, the risk assessment and the cleanup will be made at the appropriate levels. At first federal level, and then the state levels will be considered as the
ARARs.
applicable ARARs. That one is hard for me to remember, but that's when they look at, are there other laws that factor in? And that's part of the decision-making process.
Correct. And it's when we get towards the end with the finalized documents.
right, but if I may follow up, if we're gonna threshold this search, right, at a certain federal level, and the ARARs end up becoming much smaller, then visiting all of the places that we previously didn't have to look because it was below that threshold, right, is the mechanism for revisiting everything we said was okay at 70 and now is going to go lower. Like, does that mechanism exist? What does that look like?
Can I comment on that actually? So a part
Wait,
of.
introduce yourself for the folks on the phone.
For the project. A part of looking at the ARs is actually a part of the FS, which is a part of the remedial design. So while we're looking at the RSLs, the OSC RSLs, which are actually from November, to delineate the site and do the risk assessment, we to determine if there is a risk or not. And if there is a risk, then we go to the next step, which is the feasibility study. And in the feasibility study is where we look at the ARs to see if we've delineated well enough. And that's where we look at the Massachusetts numbers. So it is a process where we are eventually going to be looking at the Massachusetts numbers, but it isn't until after the risks are done. So I hope that clarifies it. No.
But on this slide, this is talking about soil sampling and the MCL.
Introduce yourself, please.
Oh, sorry. Jennifer Cahill, chemist from USACE. The MCLs don't apply to soil. So the new drinking water better regulations that were just promulgated do not apply to the soil sampling that is on this slide.
Aquifer. This is a primary drinking water aquifer. Our wells are half a mile from the original burn site. You can't say that here.
So it will apply, maybe it will apply depending on what the DOD decides to groundwater. But for the sampling that is being described on this site, we're measuring soil concentrations.
Okay, so
Okay.
okay, but when Dr. Bout came and did the project, right? He spent quite a bit of time explaining to us that there was an assumption that things weren't being moved from the soil, but that assumption was incorrect and that they were very mobile. So this is.
You're not making that assumption.
Yeah.
No, we want to find that out for sure.
So she, I don't know if you heard her, she was saying they're not making that assumption, but I think if you go back to your objectives, it was pretty clear that one of the questions you're asking was, go back to that slide on the soil, I think it's right before this one. The one of the questions that you'll be examining is whether contaminants are moving from the soil to the groundwater.
Correct.
Okay?
My question is there an existing mechanism by which those areas that have been thresholded out will be revisited when it comes time to look at the Massachusetts ARARs and the fact that here are rules about soil in the aquifer where we pull our drinking water from, in fact, matter, right? The MCP includes those numbers. I was there when they were promulgating those numbers, and a lot of people on this call were. And so we know that's coming into effect. And so the question is, does the mechanism to revisit the places that were previously cleared for future work exist when you get to that level of the CERCLA process? The things that were previously excluded because they didn't meet that EPA federal threshold, are those going to be revisited? That is my question. Does that mechanism exist?
I'm sure it's been.
This is Amanda Martin. I think the not super straightforward answer is when it comes to PFAS and the constantly evolving nature of all the regulations we're working with, we're kind of building the plane as we fly it. And if it becomes necessary to return to the site and collect additional data to meet new objectives, then that is what will be done.
Thank you.
But is it safe to say that as you look at all of the past data that's been collected, to include, as you're doing your study and your modeling, you're going to look at all of it, to include the excluded sites. That is going to be part of the data that goes through your analysis, right?
So
And if those numbers exist, why wouldn't they be?
So currently, if the areas of concern that were evaluated during the SI and the ESI had an exceedance in the screening level, it is being further evaluated during the remedial investigation process, and it will be included in the assessment.
But then the ones that were below that threshold will be still part of the data? Or that data will not just naturally be excluded because it's threshold, it's still numbers that can be used to model.
I think the only area of concern we're excluding in the that didn't make it from the SI to the RI was AOC3, which was a stormwater drainage basin. And it looked like the data from that area of concern did not indicate that that was actually a release there. So it isn't being further evaluated in the remedial investigation. It was closed during the site inspection phase of the CERCLA process. But then any data collected for the remaining areas of concern will be considered moving forward.
I think we're getting hung up on, maybe we're
Yeah.
not using the same words,
Yeah.
the same language
I want-
when you say mechanism, because each time we look at the stuff, it's almost with fresh eyes and with the current regulations that are out. So you're kind of attacking the problem from anew each time. You're just building upon what you've already looked at. So I think we're kind of just getting confused with the terms that we're using between mechanism and that word. For us, this doesn't jump into like what we know as process. We're going, it's new for us. We're doing the sampling. We're going out to all the areas that we're explaining through the UFP plat. So I think we're just kind of hung up on words there, but if we don't get it clear, we can take this back and write a response. So if we haven't gotten the answer down, feel free to send it back to me and we'll try and get it written out.
I think that's a good solution, and I appreciate that, because it's 7:05. This meeting is supposed to end at 7:30. The library closes at 8 o'clock. We have to be packed up and out of here. So, I appreciate the questions and the discussion, and I don't want to stop that, but I want to move forward to the presentation. I think Chris's solution that if there are lingering questions that have been asked but not answered in a way that, you know, that you feel like you got an answer, you have a following question, we can follow up with that in writing. And then what we would do if we do that, get your questions in within a few days kind of thing, not, forever. But what we would do is add those, the questions, the written questions and responses we would add to the meeting summary.
Mary Ann does have her hand raised. I don't know if we want to do.
Mary Ann, go ahead, and then we'll move on.
Just quickly, I just hope, you've all made me dizzy. Okay, I just want to say that. Is that, that somebody will clarify this in the future. What I'm hearing, what I heard, it may help when you try to come back to clarify it, is that what you're saying is that when more data becomes available, what Christian was drawing attention to that one slide, when more data becomes available, whatever you discarded originally that wasn't a problem, you will go back and are willing to go back and test those sites, those original sites. Because we're talking potatoes and potatoes now, and I don't, and you make it very confusing for people to try to understand this thing. And I think you've already realized that, because you are not agreeing internally here with how you're presenting this, because whether it's mechanism or process, somebody has to straighten that out. And as simple is, will you go back? Will those sites, I think that's what Kristen was asking. If I misinterpreted her question, then will you go back and test those sites once more data becomes available or more recommendations are made at whether the federal or the state level, so that those aren't going to be ignored just because they were once dealt with and you didn't think there was a problem there. Now, that might be an oversimplification, but whatever you were trying to communicate, that's what I heard. So if you want to clarify it now or later, please be my guest.
Chris, is that something you can answer?
Take it later.
He's going to take that question back to.
Right, you know it down there.
He's when I called on him just now to see if he could respond, he's madly writing. And so I think he wants to get his response back in writing after checking into this a little bit. Is that right, Chris?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Okay, fine. Okay.
Thanks. Let's move on.
I think slide 23, maybe that's where we are. Yeah, we skip ahead there. Oh, wait, come back. One more. There it is, right there. Okay, so moving on. We've added this slide right here. What this shows, you can see the title of it, potential offsite PFAS sources. So part of what I've been talking about thus far is, our investigation is focusing on what is related to Barnes itself, DOD related PFAS releases. And so that's what we're trying to establish. But what I wanted to show this slide for, or to you guys, is to illustrate that, and you can't really see it, and I do apologize, but within those purple circles, within those pink circles, all around Barnes, there are other potential sources for PFAS. And so there are various industries, manufacturers, whatever the case might be. There's a number of them. There's too many to cover, obviously, but those are indicated in yellow, which again, you can't really see, and I apologize. But that's just an illustration that there are other factors at play here. So we're going to be investigating a very large area, as you saw with those highlighted areas that we showed before. But there are other potential sources. So that's one of the things we're going to be looking at. And part of our investigation is also PFAS signature study, which is a method to look at the type of, or look at the PFAS that is in the ground and actually evaluate what signature it has. In other words, what was the potential source of that PFAS? So was it from this type of industry? Was it this type of use? And so those are the kind of things that we're also going to use to inform our report. So go to the next slide, please. Okay, surface water sampling. So again, DQO, we're trying to answer some very important questions. The first one is the PFAS groundwater contributing to surface water concentrations for PFAS? So I've kind of touched on that before. There is interaction between groundwater and surface water. We just want to understand whether or not if those PFAS concentrations are going to be connected and how they interact with one another. And again, what is the extent of that Barnes-related PFAS in various surface water bodies? So I'm going to show you a figure here in a moment that will show you where we anticipate sampling to help answer those questions. And of course, number 3, it's the same as the rest of them. Are those sources in the previous slide? Are those PFAS sources not related to Barnes contributing to those concentrations that we see, either upstream, adjacent, or downstream? So again, with our PFAS sampling and our PFAS signature study, those are the questions that we're trying to answer. Next slide, please. Okay, the surface water monitoring approach. So there's a lot of words here, I apologize. Surface water samples that are going to be collected from the midpoint of, and I know we had some discussion on this before, but the samples we collect are going to be taken from the midpoint of the water column and generally on the side of the water body closest to that known PFAS source. So if you're in the stream or in the creek, whatever the case might be, the idea would be to sample closest to the source. So we are going to have to look at our maps. We're going to have to look at where we are in relationship to Barnes to determine where that's going to be taken. And so flowing water bodies like those that we have near Barnes here are generally well mixed. And, there was some discussion before, but generally the micro layer that exists on top of that surface water body is fairly negligible and cannot really be measured with real analytical precision. So the midpoint of that surface, or the midpoint of that surface water body and nearest where the potential source might be is where that's going to be focused on for sampling. And so let's see, is there anything else we need to talk about here? So one note on let's just talk about that real quick. I know that came up previously. Mm-hmm. And so I don't want to go into too much detail. We can discuss later if we need to, but in general, that was brought up. And for foam right now, there's not enough information to include that into the risk assessment right now, at least from the DoD perspective. There are entities, I think, that are looking into this, but as it stands right now for this phase of the PFAS RI, there's just not enough research, not enough information about that to include it in our risk assessment. There are other factors that we're looking at that are more potential for exposure to receptors that we're concerned with, i.e. the soil and the groundwater and surface.
So if I could just rephrase for a minute, and you can tell me if I'm getting this right or not. Mm-hmm. So I try to walk that line between trying to understand the technical and then making sure that the public is at least somewhat able to understand. My understanding is that you're going to be collecting, where you collect samples is focused on the data that you need to go into the risk assessment, because the risk assessment drives the decisions for cleanup. Is that an accurate statement? They are nodding. For those of you who are online, they're nodding.
You are correct. You are correct. Thank you.
Okay, and then what you were saying about the foam is that even if you have data from the foam, you're not able to use that data in any meaningful way when it comes to doing the risk assessment. And now the risk assessor is nodding. Okay. I hope that helped kind of clarify things.
But why can't you use the data from the phone?
So that may be better answered by.
So this is
screen.
Grace Greenberg, risk assessor.
One of the things that you do with foam, which is a little bit different from water, is when it does contact your skin, you need to figure out how much of the PFAS goes through your skin and into your body. And we do understand sort of a basic idea of how it works with surface water, but we don't understand it with foam yet. So there's still a lot of studies going on to get an idea. There's some default numbers and some, assumptions we can make, but there are big uncertainties surrounding it. So we don't have sort of a mechanism and how we can assume how much of that is actually getting in your system. The other aspect is not everyone eats foam. So, there are studies that are looking at how much of it actually gets into your body through just the incidental ingestion part of it, having it on your hands and then licking your hands and see how much that actually gets in your body. So there is studies done specifically on surface water when you're swimming or when you're wading, but there's nothing on the foam aspect of things, and that's still undergoing. So in terms of DOD, we typically do the risk assessments with surface water because that's more well studied than the actual foam part of it.
How would you be in contact with foam?
Sorry?
How would an individual be in contact with foam?
Like if you touch it.
This is foam on the top of the water, top of surface water.
Yes.
I was just thinking just the guys who are out there spraying.
Oh,
No, this is not the original foam. This is foam on the surface of water.
This is foam on the surface of the water, and not all foam that you see on water is PFAS. Like sometimes it happens just from
Biogenic process.
yes, exactly, biological processes. There's other things that cause it, wind blowing, that kind of stuff. So
It's pretty
it's
common.
not necessarily PFAS. Most of the time it isn't, but just the fact that, we discussed foam in the last round, the last RAB, that we're just bringing it up now, that this is one of the reasons why we are not looking at foam during this phase of work.
Okay. Do we have a question online? Did you?
Kristen has a
Okay,
question.
Kristen, go ahead, but if you could try to keep it brief. I just want to make sure we don't get thrown out of the library. Go ahead.
Yeah, they won't throw you out. They're real nice over there. Just so we know, I'm just going to spell this out, right? If we're not looking at the surface layer and we're not looking where the foam reconstitutes on the surface layer, and we're not looking at the stormwater infrastructure because the dugout part of the stormwater drainage ditch didn't test well, we're not looking at any of the impacts to Arm Brook. And the thing about it is that foam that reconstitutes on the brook and then collects somewhere, and if you don't think it happens, go Google Farmington, right? Because everybody knows it happened in the Farmington River. Right? So not all foam is PFAS, but if you're not even going to look at it, that's just a ridiculously convenient way for DOD to ignore the whole situation, and that is not safe for our community. So if what we need to do is have residents find another way to test that stuff, then we will do that. But please don't sit here and pretend like it wouldn't show up there and like it wouldn't matter and that it isn't worth looking at. And there are several new recent peer-reviewed publications about dermal exposure. So don't blame it on emerging science. Like we're way past that. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on.
Okay, next slide, please. So just a couple more slides, I promise. So just one more, it's a little bit more information about our surface water and groundwater interaction. So what we're gonna do in Arm Brook, Pond Brook, Westfield River, we've got a network, or we're planning to put in a network of piezometers. And for those of you who may not know what a piezometer is, in this case, it's more or less a pipe that gets inserted into the stream bed. And what you can do with that is you can measure the water levels of the stream, measure the water levels of what's in that pipe, and you get a sense of whether or not groundwater is coming up into the stream, or whether surface water is going into groundwater. So you get an idea of how that interaction is taking place. And so the network that we install is going to help inform those questions that we talked about a little bit earlier. So if you go to this last slide, we've got a map that we can take a look at. And so again, a very wide angle here with barns right in the very center. The yellow dashed lines obviously are Armbrook over to the west and Pondbrook over to the east, Westfield River down to the south. So during the previous studies that have been done, they did collect some surface water samples, and those are shown by the little red triangles. And so in this investigation, we're going to expand on that and collect some additional surface water samples, which we just talked about, sediment samples, and then also install those piezometers within the surface water bodies. And we've also got a couple allotted for the ponds up to the northeast, up on that side as well. And is that the last slide? Do we have anything else?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Sorry, just trying to, that's
Nope.
all we have.
Okay. Other questions from the RAB? So we didn't hold them all to this point because there were a lot of slides to talk about. Any RAB members online with additional questions?
Kristen, did we get to all of your questions that you had typed in a couple?
Yeah, I was mostly concerned with whether or not anyone was going to look at the stormwater drainage infrastructure, given that cement has been proven to re-release.
This is Amanda. I can kind of speak to that. So our understanding of the conceptual site model and the stormwater infrastructure that's on the installation and on the airfield is that there are some retention ponds on base where some stormwater will sit and then, potentially infiltrate into groundwater. And then there is a little bit of stormwater infrastructure on the airfield that discharges to Armbrook and Pondbrook to the east and west. So during the initial phase of the remedial investigation, we are planning to collect surface water and sediment samples extensively throughout those water bodies. So any impacts to the community could be assessed via surface water and sediment sampling from those samples. If after the initial phase, there seems to be indication that we need to return and do additional assessment of the stormwater infrastructure, that can be done. But that's why only surface water and sediment are planned during the initial phase of the remedial investigation.
But no foam and only from the center of the column.
Well, I think the project team has a lot of thoughts on that, and we, considered the input from the RAB after the last meeting extensively and discussed it internally, and looked back at our conceptual site model, and we believe that one of the main transport mechanisms of the PFAS is infiltration from soil to groundwater, and then potentially the groundwater discharging to the surface water. So we think it's possible that if groundwater discharge is happening, we'd actually see higher concentrations of PFAS near the bottom of the surface water features. And we also want to make sure to be collecting data, as Amy was saying earlier, that we can use in a risk assessment. So we want to collect data that is the most representative exposure scenario. So if someone were to go swimming in that stream or wading, where would they most likely be exposed? And that's why we're proposing the center of the column.
Right, but if they're doing all this construction at the base, wouldn't knowing if the stormwater infrastructure is leaching and knowing whether or not replacing that would end a PFAS exposure source in the city, wouldn't that matter?
We're pondering your question. Jen, do you have, looks like Jen might have a thought.
Well, I'm unfamiliar with the stormwater infrastructure plans.
Yeah, I was trying to remember if we have anything that shows.
Know what we have for stormwater, but I can't answer your question. I'm sorry, this is Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Sinclair. I know the infrastructure on the base. However, I'm not sure I understand the question in terms of everything else, so I would rather be able to share the stormwater infrastructure that I have on base with these guys who are more of the experts that can answer those questions. That question appropriately with the correct information.
And Kristen, are you concerned? Past construction or pending construction? And if so, which construction are you referring to?
Well, I'm just thinking, right? Every time they ask for public comment on different construction phases, I keep saying, hey, while you're in there, could you please replace the stormwater infrastructure so it doesn't leach PFAS? And I don't know that anybody ever reads that stuff, right? I mean, you send it out into the ether and I don't even know if somebody's reading it. But the thing is, the Arcadis has all this information showing cement redistributing PFAS out into new stormwater because it used to carry it in old stormwater. And so if and when they talk about the dam reconstruction, they talk about the watershed coming from either side of the runway, and one side goes to Armbrook and one side goes to Pondbrook. And so if we know that there is old stormwater infrastructure there, and we know that it used to carry PFAS-y stuff, I just don't understand why we wouldn't look. Why aren't we looking? That's, I mean, right, because if you're digging it up anyway, I mean, that would be a huge win for the cost of a few cement pipes. It's low hanging fruit, people. I'm just saying.
Kristen, we haven't changed our stormwater with any construction in recent history. The stormwater plan has basically been static for over a decade since I've been here. So I think we can sit down and look at the stormwater drawings, and we can lay on the pending construction projects to see if there's any place that those two intersect. But right now, we have nothing on the books that's touching any of the stormwater runoff from base 7.
Right. If we tested it and they found out that like slip lining it would make a difference in terms of exposure and leaching, like those are small changes and easy things you don't have to dig for. There's options. Why aren't we looking?
This is Chris Brown, and one of the things I remember from this topic is that when we go through this process, the first place we start is with the release areas. And stormwater is not usually considered a release area. It's where did the firefighting take place? Where did a spill take place? Where did the chemical go from its normal storage container? We start from the release location, and a stormwater system is not usually considered. I mean, later on, when you chase it through an investigation and find out that your that your release location infiltrated your stormwater system, and you do a study on your stormwater system, then those types of things get included, but that's further down the road. That's not normally an initial thing, but it's because it's not considered a release. And that's probably why you don't see it right now. But I can look more into that too.
I was going to say the same thing, that we're focusing mostly on the major releases, the major potential releases. And currently our sources are the AOC substance. We're going to look at the soil first, and then soil into groundwater. And then eventually we may have to look into stormwater, but it's not going to be something we're going to do in this phase, but potentially in another phase, depending on the data that we get.
Right. So, again, I'm going to try to paraphrase and correct me if I say the things right or wrong, but I think it's important for folks to understand that a remedial investigation is usually done in phases. And that it's a little bit iterative. What you learn from the data you collect in one phase then influences what you do in the next phase. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Correct. Okay. Hopefully that helps people. So what I'm hearing is that you're not ruling out looking at the stormwater for all time, but it's not part of the current sampling plan that will come out in the UFP QAP this fall. Correct. Does that help, folks? Okay, there's a little bit nodding here anyway.
Chris Clark has a question.
Go ahead, Chris.
Thanks so much. Appreciate everyone who was able to join in person. There's just a COVID wave happening, so don't feel like getting exposed. I just have a quick question about, is the remedial investigation considering river sediments and as like a site of accumulation of PFAS, especially if it's going to be like groundwater, like up into river systems? Like, will there also be like riparian soil sampling happening along with surface water sampling?
This is Amanda Martin with the Corps. Yes, we will be collecting sediment samples, co-located sediment samples with the surface water samples that we collect.
Excellent.
So could you explain why you asked to put this slide up?
So,
Yes, so Chris, this is James Griffin again. So slide 27 here. The reason I want to revisit this slide, this hopefully will illustrate what the plan is. So, so those surface water bodies that are highlighted in yellow, those are the areas that we intend to investigate with both surface water and sediment sampling. So there's a number, there's 50 or 60 locations, I think, still to be determined, but within those yellow areas, that we will be investigating those two media.
Okay, and for the sake of people who might not know what sediment is, that's different from soil, because I didn't for a long time, and correct me again if I'm wrong, sediment is the soil and muck that's at the bottom of surface water bodies. So they're nodding. So hopefully that helps, because to lay people, sometimes they seem like the same thing.
Sure.
thank you for answering the question. Just as a follow-up, is there a specific reason that, like, so in the Westfield River, I see that there are two like ESI sediment sample points. Is there a specific reason why those two regions were selected? Or is this just like or is there going to be a more general screen? Like, is there going to be multiple samplings happening, or is it like, are those 2 points with the squares and triangles,
So
were those chosen
squares and
purposely?
triangles are historical sampling locations that happened previously, not selected locations in
That's
the coming phase.
Not what's proposed.
Not what's proposed, right? The reason we didn't put proposed location on this figure is because the QAP is still under review. So you'll see actual dots on a map in the QAP. And like James was saying, it's like, I think 60 sampling locations spread among all of the areas highlighted in yellow. So it'll be more evenly distributed throughout this area, highlighted in yellow.
Thank you. And I also do just want to reiterate that I think that from the community perspective, I hope that our partners will consider looking at surface water, or no, excuse me, drainage systems in this remedial investigation, maybe not in this first phase, but it should be considered. I wasn't fully aware that that concrete could be a source, but definitely based on all of the impermeable surface that's on the base, there's probably multiple sites where concrete is saturated with PFAS. So I would request that our partners on the RAB potentially go through and look at that if that hasn't been a list of things to consider. I know that we're all here because we realize this is a problem, but I just want to reiterate that this is a serious disaster that happened. If you lined up people in the United States in a line, people in Westfield would be number 99 to 95 for people with the highest levels of PFAS in the country, right below the industrial workers. So I just want to reiterate that. I know everyone respects and appreciates that, but this is a serious man-made disaster that happened. So thank you so much for your time and being able to support us and listen to our concerns.
Thanks for your comments, Chris. Any other questions? Okay, we're gonna move on. Are there any questions? I think we have a member of the public here. If you have any, I don't mean to call you out, point out to you, but if you have any questions, please do.
Talking about the soil samples from Arm Brook. Please keep in mind that Arm Brook today is not what it was 20 years ago, 10 years ago. There are parts of Arm Brook that are now considered an intermittent stream. That stream used to run full force, enough to bring goods down to the river. So when you're testing soil, how far you just take it from the bank in certain areas, now 20 feet from that stream outward, where the stream used to run. So
Okay.
we didn't know the scheme of soil in a stream that's now more than a trickle in some spots was running, and it's being across the roads. It ran past springtime where it flooded all the areas. So testing soil would have to be in the low areas now. You'd have to go quite a bit out to test that soil. That would be affected by that stream.
Okay, thank you very much for that comment. I appreciate that. I know they're working on the sampling plan, which will be out this fall, so hopefully take that into consideration.
Will we notify them? It will.
I think, Chris, you have previously said that, yes, we'll get the UFP QAP out to all of you to take a look. And I know, I think it was our April meeting that we had some presentation on kind of how to read the UFP QAP, and I'm guessing based on the timing, you might want to revisit those slides a little bit in October, since it'll be close to when the
Hard to tap Dr. Bounce.
understand it, right? But in April, we had a couple slides on, because the format of a UFP QAP is sort of set in stone, but there are parts of it that will be of more interest to you.
When I send the information out, I can pull those slides again. It's like, remember the little worksheets? I think I had a whole like table of contents, like, hey, here's the worksheets that you guys have been asking us the questions about. This is where I would start, so that you don't get overwhelmed with such a large document. I say that, I haven't seen the fully completed or approved versions, so I can't tell you if it's.
It'll be big, but they're not small.
But, yeah, I will give you the worksheets that I put in the previous.
So all the updates will be until October, intermittently through from now until.
While you're coming out with the plan itself, we'll be ready to distribute to them in the fall.
Yeah, so the plan is in progress. It has to go under, it goes through an extensive review process by the DOD. So first, our project team, the contractor prepares it, our project team reviews it, and then we have a Center of Excellence, an Environmental Center of Excellence that reviews it, expertise, sorry, Jen, Center of Expertise. And then, once it's approved by all of those entities, then we can release it to stakeholders, including the RAB regulators. So that's why, it just takes a while to process all of their comments and address them before it gets to RAB. Yes.
If we do all that very thorough review, hopefully there'll be less comments and difficulties.
Good, I hope so. I hope so.
So that you can focus on the parts you're interested in. So hopefully, exactly. It's a very methodical, purposeful reason.
Okay, so go forward a slide. I think the next slide, I think, was public. So I'm sorry, there's a little bit of background noise from, I think, the air conditioning kicked on.
Yes.
So public questions. Are there any public questions online?
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay, and I know I said at the beginning of the meeting that I would try to make sure we addressed Kristen's questions in the email, and I think we have done that. I have it pulled up in front of me, and so during this discussion, I've been going through that. We have talked about coordination with, she said yes, thumbs up. I won't go through them all. I've had it pulled up right here in front of me to make sure that we address them all, so I want to be cognizant of that. Okay, so let's move on. All right, we kind of caught up on time. So we had all our, well, almost 7:37. So I just want to reiterate the contact information here. New Public Affairs Manager Jay, who introduced himself at the beginning of the meeting, his phone number and email is there. So if you have comments that you want to submit, please send or any comments or questions or RAB related business, make sure you copy Kathleen and Jerry will make sure that things get to Colonel Lossacune, and then copy Chris and me. You can copy everybody on here if you want, where there's an email, but if you send it to me and I see that Chris is not on it, I'm going to forward it to him. If I see that Jay's not on it, I'm going to forward it to him to make sure things get to Colonel Lossacune. But there's who to track down. Next slide, please. I think it's websites. Yeah. So lots of websites for more information. And we've looked at these before. Well, not looked at them, but lots of information there. Westfield Water Department, PFAS information, Mass DEP. Again, I do want to call your attention to the 104th Fighter Wing. The one at the top of the page is where So that's the website for the wing here. There is information on the RAB. That's where we're posting the meeting summaries. That's where the application is. And I will take it. I think Jennifer already looked at it to make sure the contact is Jennifer Baker for those to be sent to her. So that information is there. So you can, yeah, browse away on those websites. Next slide, I think, is final closing comments from our co-chairs. So Colonel or Kathleen?
Thank you.
Okay.
Kathleen, you and I joked a little bit that, lawyers are thorough, right? That's a nice way to say that they're slow. But I will say that thorough also describes what's going on here. And we are thorough for many reasons. Thorough because public health is important. Thorough, that's important work that needs to be done. We need to do it thoroughly. Thorough because we're talking about millions of dollars of taxpayer money that's going to be spent potentially to remediate this. So while we're investigating, we are investigating, we're following the evidence, right? The challenge to the team is to follow the evidence wherever it goes. So if it leads to stormwater, we go down the path of stormwater. If it leads to surface water, soils, homes, the challenge to the team is to follow the evidence where it goes to build the case so that we, if needed, can ask a thoroughly investigated site to get corrected by the United States government, right? And if it's not done thoroughly, if it's not done correctly, then the remediation isn't going to happen on time. So to be thorough now, to gather all the concerns of the community, so that this process continues to move forward, that's the challenge. I know again that we get passionate about it, and that passion is what makes us good at what we do. Right? So let's make sure we keep passion, but we stay thorough. We don't let emotion bite us, push us to accelerate a process that's thorough. CERCLA is moving. You're doing well. I think you have all the right people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Colonel. And before I adjourn, I just want to make a personal note. Jacobs is at the end of our current contract. Under our current contract, this is my last meeting. We have bid on the next contract, which would pick up with the October meeting. There are a couple other companies that bid. We had hopes that that the results of that would be out by now. But in talking to Chris and another remedial project manager, because I was at the Stewart RAB last night. That answer is coming out in a couple of weeks. So I hope that I'll see you all in October. If I'm not, I might even be on the line because, I want to see where things are going with you, And if it is not us, I'll make sure that there is a smooth transition to the next contractor, but I sure hope that I'll be back in October.
Thank you.
So, thank you. All right, with that, we'll adjourn the meeting. So thanks very much. 7:41, that's not too bad. I appreciate all the discussion. Take cookies. Vegetables, even.
Vegetables. Take breakfast sandwich. We talk.
Like when I look up.